body and grinding down the center.
Okay, we'll start with this. In my previous video, we talked about Terry Harper's first professional loss, a crushing defeat at the hands of a very enthusiastic, very game, very ready, very capable Alicia Baumgartner. And the question is, where does Terry Harper go from here? Can she recover from this? And I wholeheartedly believe that she can, though what happens within the next 12 months,
that's crucial.
We already know that Terry Harper likely has a rematch clause incorporated into the contract both fighters signed to do this fight. We already know that she has the option to exercise it, though I think Terry shouldn't. I see no reason for Terry Harper to rush back in there with someone like Alicia Baumgartner, because a second fight, an immediate rematch, would likely yield the same result. What Matchroom and what Team Harper must do now is rebuild Terry Harper. And I wholeheartedly believe they can do that, and she can return to be an even better fighter, more experienced than she was before, though Alicia should not be the next fighter that she fights.
These are unique circumstances.
Terry Harper came into this fight off a 12-month layoff and a refracture to an already injured hand that she was nursing. These were less than ideal circumstances for her to take on someone as capable as Alicia Baumgartner. It's for this reason that Terry shouldn't rush back in there with her. No, Terry should look to fight someone else, perhaps a former champion in Eva Brutnitska,
an unbeaten contender in France's own Ele Mechalet,
Poland's own Alexandra Sidorenko, someone
that'll give Terry something to work around.
Some resistance, though not so much that Terry's in over her head, because lest we forget, she is rebounding off a very vicious knockout loss. It's going to sound funny, but I don't think for a second Terry should have a rematch with Alicia, though I do think she needs to get back out there next year sooner rather than later.
No, that sounds funny.
It's unfortunate for Terry that she has to end this year on a somber note. But next year, she can hit the ground running, and the sooner she gets back out there, the better, because it's time off.
It hurt her.
Those of you that have followed this channel a long time will know that I'm not one for being emotionally invested in fighters. I'm not one for having a situation pull at my heartstrings, but I believe in Terry Harper. I believed in her before this loss, and I will believe in her afterwards. I firmly believe she can rebound from it because she is an excellent boxer, and she's better than what we saw yesterday. She just bit off more than she could chew. It was a foolhardy decision. We all make them from time to time, and
it was Alicia's night.
Alicia Baumgartner, who we're going to be talking more about in the days and weeks to come.
She's excellent.
But as far as Terry, I do think she needs to hit the ground running next year, because she needs to be reminded what she's capable of. She needs to be reminded of who and what she is, and she's a fighter. She was a champion. She can be one again if she's in the right headspace. And sitting around like a lump feeling sorry for herself, that ain't gonna cut it.
The layoff was due to an injury.
Thus, those were extenuating circumstances, and under those circumstances, Terry did as best as she could, but it just wasn't her night. It wasn't her fight to win. It was Alicia's moment.
And the usual suspects were giving Eddie Hearn stick after the fight.
After a rough night in Sheffield for some local favorites, not realizing that in all likelihood, Alicia Baumgartner's next fight is going to be a part of a Matchroom show, whether
it's against Terry or somebody else.
I don't know what these morons are gloating about, but in all likelihood, Alicia's next fight, whether it's against Terry or some other girl, it's going to be a part of a Matchroom show. It's not going to be part of a top-ranked show, I don't think. Not Boxer on Sky, not Golden Boy Promotions, not PBC, certainly. They don't even sign female fighters.
They interpreted this as a loss for Matchroom.
The loss for Eddie Hearn, not realizing that both Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, they're global. They're not limited to a UK market, a UK audience. They have American fighters, Uzbek fighters, Spanish fighters, like Kiko Martinez. When Kiko knocked out Kid Galahad, the people in Sheffield likely were very upset about that. They weren't happy about it. They weren't happy about seeing Terry get stopped the way that she got stopped. But where do you imagine that Kiko Martinez's next fight is going to be? You think it's going to be on...
You think he's gonna go to the PBC now?
You mouth-breathing morons, you fucking idiots, don't you understand? Kiko Martinez is as good as a Matchroom fighter.
And in all likelihood, his next fight is gonna be a part of a Matchroom show.
And the same applies to Alicia. You think you don't got options on her?
You know, it's mostly Americans taking the piss.
They should be singing Eddie Hearn's praises that he doesn't protect his fighters. He makes the best possible fights that he can make for the paying public, for the boxing fans. He certainly isn't protecting Joshua Buatsi by putting him in there with Maxime Vlasov. Hardly can accuse him of protecting his fighters for letting Terry Harper go out there against Alicia Baumgartner after 12 months of inactivity. In Matchroom, young Alicia Baumgartner has found the platform to launch her career into the next level. And that is an opportunity that was afforded to her by who? By Matchroom.
The American-based outfits didn't give her that opportunity.
Matchroom did. And we are going to be talking more about that in another video. For the time being, rebuilding Terry has to be the focus. In the next 12 months, what he needs to do is use Alicia Baumgartner to spearhead the effort for women's boxing in America while they rebuild Terry Harper.
2 to 3 fights.
Keep her out of world title contention for the time being. Let her rebuild gradually, the way that she needs to. Keep her out of world title contention. Keep her out of that Michaela Mayer, Hyun Mi Choi, Alicia Baumgartner conversation. And allow her to rebuild, regroup, recover, and rebound. Terry Harper herself, the former champion, post-fight released a statement that reads, "Just letting everyone know I'm fine. Just heartbroken. The biggest congratulations to my opponent. This is boxing, job's fucked, and I'm off back to the chip shop. Love you all, and thank you for your support. Logging out for a few days." And I think that there's more in store for Terry Harper than she realizes here and now. She probably can't see it yet, but it's not back to the chip shop for Terry.
These things happen.
You know, it's not just that Alicia is a strong puncher, it's that Terry was coming off a very long layoff, a layoff that was so long she likely forgot what it felt like to take a clean shot right on the kisser.
From someone that's got a lot of bad intentions.
Terry has endeared herself to the fans over there in the United Kingdom across the pond, and if people like anything, especially in this sport, they like a good comeback story. That could be Terry Harper's story in 2022. They just have to play their cards right and take a measured approach, because patience is a virtue. And just in keeping with the theme of what happens next, based on this past weekend's action, we saw Jaime Munguia, former WBO junior middleweight of Mexico, now at middleweight, take on a very game Gabriel Rosario. And I have to say, based on what I saw, Jaime's getting better. Moreover, I think he's about as ready as he's going to be for a world title shot, a world title opportunity. We know that post-fight, Munguia made some mention of a Gennady Golovkin's fight, a fight that was talked about in the past, a fight that Jaime was tabbed to be involved with, just didn't materialize. I do anticipate that if Gennady makes it past Japan's own Ryota Murata, WBA middleweight champion Ryota Murata, this is a viable avenue. This is a viable option for Jaime, though there is some talk of Jaime's position with the WBC. The WBC that we all know would like to see a Mexican fighter holding that green belt.
Yeah, let's not beat around the fucking bush, all right?
Behind Jaime Munguia is the Ukraine's own Sergey Didivianchenko, who still hasn't rebounded off that loss to Jamal Charlo in his last fight. He's supposed to be fighting Carlos Adames very soon.
Early next month on the 5th.
As part of the Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz pay-per-view. Thus, he's not available for a final eliminator with a Jaime Munguia. Perhaps Chris Eubank Jr. might answer the call should that order come down. We'll see. Chris Eubank Jr. and Jaime Munguia seem to have a similar target.
They both want Gennady.
And I could see Gennady Golovkin fighting either one of them. I could see Gennady traveling to the UK for a Chris Eubank Jr. fight. It's possible because Gennady's been there before. He fought Kell Brook there. Though the Munguia fight seems to be feasible, perhaps a little more feasible, because Jaime Munguia fights on DAZN, and so does Gennady Golovkin. Thus, there are no platform issues to have to iron out. You have to remember that Chris Eubank Jr., who's supposed to be in action again this year against Liam Williams, should he make it through that, he still is a flagship fighter for Wasserman, Sky, whereas Gennady very recently amended his contract with DAZN. He's still under contract with them. He's going to be fighting. He's going to be fighting there for the foreseeable future. And fighting there, a Munguia fight is within arm's reach, more so than a Eubank fight, even though a Eubank fight, it's also a possibility, just not as possible as Munguia. Jaime Munguia, whose recent victory this weekend and his rank with the WBC, the World Boxing Council, has given way to conversations about a fight that I don't think is going to happen anyway, though people are still talking about it. Munguia versus Charlo. And I'll say that Munguia versus Charlo, in a domestic pay-per-view here stateside, could actually do good business. If you did the fight somewhere in Texas where you might have some Charlo fans and you got some Chicano fans, some Mexican fans that'll show up to support Jaime, you could sell a lot of tickets. You could do good business. You could. But because Jaime's with Zanfer and Golden Boy, Jamal, he's with the PBC, Jaime fights on DAZN, Jamal fights on Fox.
And Showtime.
Though not on DAZN. The fight's a good fight, but it's not a fight I expect to see. It's not a fight I expect to happen. I expect Jamal Charlo to continue to preserve himself so that one day he may win the Canelo Alvarez sweepstakes. Someday, perhaps next year, in May, when Canelo Alvarez means to return. I don't actually expect Jamal and Jaime to ever fight, but people are still talking about this. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, Jamal Charlo is now the fighter that he's going to be for the rest of his career, in my humble opinion. This is not a young fighter who has all the time in the world to continue to improve. Not that I think Jamal Charlo is improving. I actually think he's regressing. I actually thought more of him as a junior middleweight than what we've seen at middleweight. Jamal Charlo is 31 years old, not particularly ambitious. Seems like a guy to me that's prepared to cash out. He doesn't want the Canelo fight because he means to win it. He just wants to show up and get paid.
Doesn't have a champion's mindset.
Not much of a fighter's spirit. Not lately, the way he's been avoiding a fight with Demetrius Andrade for all this time. The only available champion for him to unify with. If he liked his chances, he'd fight him just as quickly as he fought a Brandon Adams. Just as quickly as he fought a Sergey Derevyanchenko off a loss or a Juan Montiel.
Yeah, I mean, Charlo's not getting better.
But Jaime is. Jaime, who is several years younger than Jamal Charlo, could see himself becoming a two-division champion like Jamal Charlo in time. Jaime Munguia is a pressure fighter. Jamal Charlo is a boxer puncher. Jamal Charlo is at a stylistic advantage over Jaime Munguia because those boxer punchers, they can be kryptonite to those pressure guys that want to come forward and let the fists fly. The thing is, I think Jaime is a better physical specimen than Jamal Charlo. I don't think Jamal Charlo's power is all it's made out to be. I don't view Jamal Charlo as being bankable anymore, whereas Jaime is. He's developed certain characteristics, certain qualities that he retains fight by fight. An iron chin, the same kind of shot that took out Bektemir Melikuziev in the Rosario fight, the same kind of shot that dropped Maciej Suliecki and dropped Glenn Tapia, is the same kind of shot that Jaime took from that same Gabe, and he kept on coming. I don't view Jamal Charlo as being all that big a puncher, because if he were a big puncher, he would have stopped Brandon Adams. He would have stopped Juan Montiel, and he didn't. Those are the kind of guys you're supposed to plow through if you are, in fact, a big puncher. And Jamal didn't plow through those guys. He decisioned those guys. Thus, against a real big guy, young guy, durable guy, with an iron chin like Jaime, I don't see Jamal's power availing him.
And I don't see him matching Jaime's work rate either.
Jamal Charlo's not a prolific puncher. He's not a volume guy. He's a sharpshooter. He's the kind of guy that's looking to set up a shot to get a guy hurt. And if he gets the guy hurt, then he'll let his hands go. But as far as matching Jaime's output, he's not going to do that. And I don't think he has a gas tank like Jaime either.
Or a chin like Jaime's.
I don't think he's all that durable. I don't think he's all that good. I think he's pretty basic. He's a good basic 1-2 fighter that's got a belt. That's what he's been reduced to. That's what he's become. So what happens when you have a guy like Jamal who has a stylistic advantage over a guy like Jaime Munguia, but he's not as good a physical specimen? I'll tell you what happens.
Jamal wins the early rounds.
The pace catches up to him to the point where he becomes flustered due to Jaime's volume and durability. The fact that Jaime's looking to crowd him and tee off. Jamal Charlo is the kind of fighter that needs a bit of space to add torque to his shots and really drive them. And a guy like Jaime won't allow him that space, won't allow him that time to even set up the shot to use the space to add power to the punch, because Jaime is a pressure guy.
Eventually that aggression would fluster Jamal.
And he might see himself either succumbing to exhaustion or being outworked.
Or both.
The bottom line here is Jaime is showing improvement fight by fight. He's a younger guy than Jamal Charlo, so he's got time. But Jamal, he's not getting better. He's getting worse. He's not staying in character. Whatever he was at 154, that ain't what he is at 160.
Not that it matters, because I don't think they're ever gonna fight anyway.
But that's what I think. Finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, David Benavidez has declared that he wants to fight Canelo Alvarez next, following his stoppage of Kyron Davis overnight. I know a fight with Canelo won't be easy, but I'm willing to give my heart and soul in that ring to get the victory. I know I can get it done. The difference between David and Jamal and some of these other guys that claim to want a Canelo Alvarez fight is, I think David wants the payday like any other prize fighter wants the payday, but I also think he wants the fight because he truly believes he can be the guy that beats Canelo. Whether or not Canelo gives him that opportunity, your guess is as good as mine, though if he doesn't, if he decides to fight Jamal, decides to knock him out instead, I won't complain, because I reiterate at this point, these guys are indistinguishable from each other. It's all the same. They all want the same thing, and they're all in the same position, in the same place in their careers, to where Canelo has separated himself from them so much.
It's up to him what he wants to do. He earned the right.
Canelo versus Andrade, Charlo, Benavidez, Bivol, Better Beef, hell, even Joe Smith Jr. Even a trilogy with Gennady Golovkin is fine by me at this point, because Canelo Alvarez really has established himself as the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport of boxing here today, and I'm suspicious of anyone beating the drum for any fighter in particular, when none of them stand out.
Don't cry me a river about Andre.
Don't do that for David Benavidez either.
Or Jamal Charlo.
Canelo's earned the right to choose. You don't have to like it, but that's what's going on.
Fucking expect me to feel sorry for anybody.
Anybody in particular, that's the business. At any given moment, you've got 3, 4, maybe even 5 guys, maybe even 6, that all want to fight the same guy, and he can't fight them all at once.
Fucking guy just went undisputed in 11 months.
You can't expect me to give Canelo Alvarez stick for not fighting your guy in particular, your guy, whoever that might be, Demetrius Andrade or David Benavidez, when
You're expecting the most from the guy doing the most.
you should be expecting the most from those who are doing the least. The onus is not on Canelo Alvarez to prove himself anymore. He's done that. He's fought the fights that these guys have yet to have fought in.
That's why he has the audience that he has.
Before you make any quips, your nitpicks, and your anecdotes about Canelo and his resume and what you think of him, realize that his adoring public doesn't care, and the reason he even has an adoring public is because he's fought the fights, which is what they want.
And a good number of these fighters just want to capitalize off his adoring public.
Instead of building a following of their own by doing what?
What?
By fighting the fights.
That's what.
And while I do think that David Benavidez approaches a Canelo fight with a very different mindset than a Jamal Charlo, and while I might think that a David Benavidez fight is more interesting than a Jamal Charlo fight,
He ain't next. I ain't gonna cry about it.
guys expect too much of this guy.
Not enough of everyone else.